Hey, do you guys remember all those balloons that were being blown out of the sky not too long ago? It seemed like every other day something was being shot down. Well, so do I. Don't you want to see the footage that exists from that? We know it exists. Well, so do I. But guess what? None of us will, at least for now, because it's all classified. At least that's what they just told me. And the military doesn't want to let us see anything. Hey, everybody, this is John Greenwald Jr. from theblackvault.com. This story is pretty fun and intriguing to me, just simply because I didn't expect it. I was trying to get declassified or released for public consumption videos of the shootdowns of those different incidents that we know took place, that the military admits took place. They say they shot down these balloons, is how they're primarily described. I tried to get all of the footage or photos or whatever they would give me, but they turned it all down. They said that it was classified. They don't want to say or reveal anything. Now, just a refresher for you guys, the incidents that I'm referring to occurred on February 4th of this year in 2023 off the coast of South Carolina. That's the shoot down of the Chinese spy balloon that we heard the most about. But then more objects were shot down. February 10th over Alaska, February 11th over Yukon, and February 12th over Lake Huron. These were all heavily covered in the media, but obviously visual imagery to go along with it was pretty much non-existent. The question mark was why. If we're talking about just, oopsie, we shot down a balloon, it wasn't a Chinese spy craft this time, well then why can't we see it? Now, some may quickly argue that the heads-up display, the imagery, the metadata, whatever, causes videos like this to be classified. Ergo, they just won't release anything. So the object itself is not secret or sensitive, but rather that information. Well, I'm here to argue all that information can be stripped, blurred, or redacted while the object still remains in clear view. That is provable time and time again throughout decades of especially wartime footage being released by the Department of Defense with those redactions and with those blurs that allows that sensitive imagery to be sent out. Now, here's the actual denial letter. It goes through what I had requested, which again was all visual imagery of the shoot down of those balloons or unidentified aerial objects, which they referred to them as well. Kind of a safety net in case they didn't describe them as balloons internally. And I say I want the shoot down of the balloons, a little bit of a safety net so they know exactly what I'm referring to. I gave all the dates and locales that I already went over. And I was seeking all photos, videos, cockpit footage, personal cell phone videos that were taken by the pilots and given to the DoD, etc. All of that I was going after. Any and all that could be released, that's what I wanted, whether it be as it stood when I requested it, classified or unclassified. I wanted it reviewed for release. Their explanation was simply it was classified. The FOIA exemption for that is B1. You've heard me talk about that a lot on this channel. But more specifically, Executive Order 13526. They do two citations, one to Section 1.4C and 1.4E. Now, why is that relevant? Well, in a tweet that I put out to everybody, so you guys can see it, 1.4C, intelligence activities, including covert action, intelligence sources and methods, or cryptology. And then 1.4E is scientific, technological, or economic matters relating to national security. So when they want to exempt something and they feel it fits into that category, that's what they refer to as and put it as properly classified. So that's the explanation there. You can see the rest of the letter. Again, I won't go over it just for time reasons, but you can download it all. So now the biggest question for me is why can't they release it? I'll beat this dead horse quite a bit simply because we need to ask that question. If these are just regular balloons, then what is the issue for releasing that information? Now, here's a couple reminders for you guys that they have released some imagery, just not of the shoot down, but the question mark is why. These are amazing photos. If you haven't seen them, I published them on the Black Vault. They are officially released by the Department of Defense. This was the Chinese spy balloon, and they released all sorts of stages of this event, from the takeoff of the F-22 to the search for the wreckage, to the discovery of the wreckage, And then ultimately to my favorite pictures, because these are fantastic and highly detailed, you can see the wreckage itself that they're pulling from the ocean. So clearly, they're not afraid to show that debris, that balloon. And I would argue that this would likely be the most sensitive of all the events that took place in February, simply because this was a foreign adversary's spy platform, a spy piece of technology that we shot down. And yet here we are with some detailed photographs. Granted, they're not blueprints, they're more debris than anything, but clearly you can see how it's made, what the structure is, so on and so forth. So there's really nothing sensitive about this, right? So what's the difference between releasing these types of detailed images and that information that would be the imagery of the shoot down itself? I don't know. Again, given the caveat that you can blur and remove all that sensitive data, which does make sense that it would remain classified. Another thing that I want to remind you guys of is the spy balloon, the Chinese spy balloon that was shot down. Although it was first a leak, the Department of Defense later had no problem admitting that this was taken by them. Big shock. It wasn't fake, and this was of the Chinese balloon taken from the cockpit of a U-2 spy plane. So yet again, the DoD has no problem sending out these visual images from sensitive platforms like the U-2. Even though it's an old plane, there's still a lot that's classified behind it. Yet here we are, we've got photographs from the cockpit of it, seeing the balloon. What's the difference between this and shooting the sucker down? A missile that we all know about? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, yet that's their argument. And lastly, although the MQ-9 didn't play a role that we know of anyway in these shootdowns, this I wanted to bring up just in case you haven't seen it. It's pretty cool. The Reaper drone had filmed the Su-27, the Russian aircraft that sprayed fuel all over the drone and then later kind of collided with it and brought the drone down. If you haven't seen the footage, it's pretty amazing. But why I'm bringing this up, because it seemingly is a bit unrelated, is that MQ-9 Reaper footage is inherently classified. In fact, I'll be doing more of a piece on this later, but I started researching a bit about the visual imagery on the MQ-9 just to kind of see how the imagery is treated from a classification standpoint, how it's released, and then here with this, how it was essentially fast-tracked, meaning that the military wasted no time in taking what we know as classified information and putting it out there. So this was something that proves even more when it comes to sensitive equipment, because the Reaper is highly classified. Many aspects are highly classified. Taking that sensitive footage taken by sensitive platforms and fast-tracking the release of it. Why won't they do it with the drones and the balloons that we know are of great, immense public interest? It makes absolutely no sense to me. I truly don't understand it. Now, I have filed an appeal. I am fighting it. I am looking for any releasable information. And should they release that, you know that I will bring it to you. But I wanted to at least do a short video on this and explain my intrigue behind their full denial of all of that material. Now, I have been asked this by a couple other people. If you really look at the nitty-gritty details of the request and the denial, yes, I was going after the imagery of the shoot down. Now, some have asked me, well, what about the imagery leading up to the shoot down? You know, were they spying on it? Was the U-2 there taking a bunch of photographs like we know it was of the Chinese spy balloon? And those are excellent questions. The reason why I differentiated the request, because I do have a second case for that, which is still open, is that I felt that the shoot down footage was specific enough to hopefully get a expedited request. But on top of that, get the information released. I didn't think that it would actually be classified. Again, with the exception of that maybe sensitive heads-up display graphics or metadata. But once that's removed, I felt that would probably be the easiest. The Reason I differentiated it again was for speed, but also some of that stuff where we have spy craft that's maybe, and I'm speculating here, taking photographs over U.S. soil, flying wherever it may be, maybe that's a little bit more sensitive. Again, that's just speculation and a guess. It may not even be remotely true. But in the FOIA world, what I try and do is, when I can and where I can, separate requests like that for speed purposes, but also just kind of speculating a little bit on what may be a hindrance to processing the request and make it take longer. Doesn't mean I'm right or wrong, but I wanted to give you a little bit of the method to the madness there. So that second case that's looking for photos or videos of the objects prior to the shoot down, that was filed after this one that I just went over and is still being processed. Where that ends up, who knows? But you know I'll bring it to you when it finally comes to an end. That said, if you're watching on YouTube, please give a thumbs up. Make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and turn the notifications on. The biggest help of all. And I say this every video because it's true. Help spread the word about the channel if you feel the content is worthwhile. That is the biggest help that you can be to this channel. And thank you in advance for anybody who chooses to do so. That said, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next time. I know that there's some fun stories coming up. And with that, this is John Greenwald Jr. signing off. And we will see you then.